Alright, welcome back to the Rory Football YouTube channel, the second biggest football channel on YouTube, hosted by someone called Rory who supports Chelsea. You'll never sing that. And yeah, it's been a while, hasn't it? That's because for the past 4 months or so, I've been away travelling on a sort of gap year, stroke sabbatical, stroke haven't got a fucking clue what I'm doing with my life kind of thing. Look, I've got wristbands on my wrists now. Aren't I fucking worldly? So this video is basically going to be recapping all the football related activities I got up to on my trip while I was on the other side of the world, staying as far away from Chelsea's tragic season as possible. Let's get into it. Shit, I should probably mention I went to South America. That's quite important because that's where this video is set and also why football is so kind of relevant. Alright, cool. Right, so on this trip, I visited 10 countries in about 4 months. Those being Brazil, Uruguay, Argentina, Chile, Paraguay, Bolivia, Peru, Colombia, Ecuador, and Mexico. It's worth mentioning that this was not a football trip. My friend Johnny, who I was traveling with, not a huge football fan, so we were not looking to do football-related activities everywhere we went. Which is why I will not be talking about every single one of these countries, which is probably for the best because this video, let's be honest, is going to be quite long and boring anyway. However, I'll try and give a breakdown of what I did, how I did it, and any tips about, pricing, how to get tickets to stuff, and also a few safety tips here and there. Pretty much anything I would have liked to have known going out, I will tell you guys. So should you ever visit one of these countries and you want to do some of the stuff, you'll have some sort of reference point. To be honest, you could just Google it, and I could have just Googled it, but, for people who are lazy like me and don't like doing their own research, that's what I'm making this video for. Before I go into the specific countries, I want to say as a whole that this continent is truly football mad. Everyone walks around in shirts, every TV screen in any bar or restaurant has some sort of football game on. Honestly, you don't need Spanish or Portuguese to make friends out here. Provided you can name 5 players who either have or are currently playing for their national team, you're going to be sweet. While in Europe, and particularly in England, we have the money and the on-field quality, which kind of dwarfs the rest of the footballing world, I do believe that the game's soul and passion belongs in South America and that this was the home of football. The passion for the game and the purity of it really just made me fall in love with football all over again. While European football is naturally going to take up most of my attention, I do think I'm going to follow the Latin American game from now on and may even make some content on it, kind of depending how this video lands and if you guys have any interest in that. But anyway, into stop number 1. Brazil is football to many people. The iconic yellow kit, brilliant players who are known by nicknames, 5-time World Cup winners, the entire Shakhtar Donetsk squad, they're really interwoven in the fabric of the game. Even if you have no interest in football, you can't avoid it in Brazil. It's often described as like a religion, but for me it's closer to being like the weather or something like that. It surrounds, disrupts and dictates your day. A big game is like a storm or a heat wave in that everyone's got to adapt around it and manage their day around this big event. Quite easily the most football mad nation I've ever been to and probably ever will go to. Our first stop was Rio de Janeiro for the famous Carnival. The biggest club in Rio and one of the biggest clubs in Brazil is Flamengo, who currently have the likes of David Luiz, Felipe Luis, Arturo Vidal and Gabriel Barbosa amongst their ranks. They won last season's Copa Libertadores, and on my flight over to Brazil, my flight was full of people in Flamengo shirts making their way back from Morocco, where they had lost to Al Hilal in the semi-finals of the Club World Cup. Flamengo play their home games in the Brazilian national team stadium, the Maracana, which is one of the biggest and most famous, not just in Brazil, not just in South America, but the world. We hadn't actually planned to visit the Maracana. Rio was our first stop, and we were disorientated as it is without having to work out how to get to games or how to get tickets, etc, etc. Also, lads, it was the Rio Carnival. We had other things to occupy our time with. However, one evening we found ourselves with not much to do, and we realised that 2 of the other teams in Rio, Vasco da Gama and Botafogo, were playing each other in a derby game at the Maracana that evening. So we sort of thought, you know what, we'll go over there, sample the atmosphere, maybe try and get tickets, but if we don't, so what? Neither of us are too arsed about going to the game at this point anyway. Until we get there, of course, and then my attitude changes. When we came out of the Metro, the place looked absolutely incredible under the lights, like one of the coolest stadiums I've ever seen from the outside. You could hear the crowd from a mile away, and as soon as that happened, I was hooked, and I was going to, try pretty hard to get into this match. There was a ticket tower outside who was offering us tickets for the equivalent of about £30, which I now realise is an absolute rip-off for Brazilian football, but I just come from Premier League prices, so to me, this sort of seemed like a fair price. So we buy these tickets, we go through through about 2 rounds of security, get to the final one, and it turns out the tickets are not valid and we are not allowed in the game.
Ronnie, what happened?
You did your best, I think.
We got scammed, so yeah, got in.
We actually did meet a lot of people on our travels after that who quite easily managed to get tickets and go to games. So if you do want to go to a game at the Maracana, I think it's very possible. I think if you just speak to your hostel or your hotel, they'll help you sort you out with tickets. Just put a bit more planning in than we did. It looked like an incredible experience. I paid £30 not to have. So yeah, go for it if you can. But this was not the best start to my football experience in South America.
Maracana, where dreams are crushed.
Our next stop in Brazil was Sao Paulo, which is home to 4 of the biggest clubs in Brazil: Sao Paulo FC, Santos, Corinthians and Palmeiras. I had a far better footballing experience here when I went to the Brazilian Football Museum, and trust me, this place is really worth a visit. In the concourse of the Pacaembu Stadium, which used to be the City Stadium, you can follow the journey of Brazilian football, from Charles Miller bringing it over to the UK through Brazil's various successful and unsuccessful World Cup campaigns, going through styles of play, tactics, players and fan culture. There's also a few fun and interactive games, which is pretty good because quite a lot of it's in Portuguese. So like we didn't understand it. So having a few things you could sort of fiddle with and play with was really needed actually.
Watch this absolute banger.
It's just spiny.
No. Prepare. Wait. It's got to prepare.
Yeah?
Oh, yeah. Go.
That counts.
Yeah.
As you can tell, I picked up this shirt. It was being sold on a market on Copacabana Beach for around 75 real, which I think's about 12 quid or something like that. I think it's the current Brazil kit, or at the very least it's the one they're wearing at the World Cup. It has Ronaldinho printed on the back, who was one of my favourite players of all time, although I'm not normally a big fan of having former players on current kits. It's a very tight fit, particularly around the neck. It's a medium, but it kind of feels like a small, so maybe I should have gone for a large. Its authenticity is massively in doubt. Do not be fooled by this Nike tick. They have not, the Nike manufacturers have never seen this thing before. It just feels a bit stretchy to be a genuine one, but considering it only costs just over a tenner, and I think a genuine one would have cost maybe 70 quid, I think it's decent value. I don't mind it. Anyway, on to the next place. After in the south of Brazil and Uruguay, we crossed the River Plate to Buenos Aires, Argentina. Fresh from winning the World Cup, this place certainly shared Rio's enthusiasm for football. The funniest example of this was when we were going around this national museum, which was in some park in Buenos Aires. The first half is all about sort of colonialism and war and culture and stuff like that. And then you kind of get halfway through and then all of a sudden you see a picture of Maradona and the rest of it just turns to football. There's loads of old shirts, boots, photos, balls, all that sort of good stuff.
River versus Boca, table football. That's sick.
It was a lovely surprise for me who was getting a bit bored of the history. Less so for my friend Johnny, who I think was tiring of all the football stuff by this point. The 4 biggest clubs in Argentina all play in Buenos Aires: Racing, San Lorenzo, and then of course the 2 big boys, Boca Juniors and River Plate. While River, a huge club, and El Monumental looks an incredible stadium, Boca Juniors at the Bombonera has always been on the bucket list for me to visit. The Boca, the working class suburb where the stadium is located, really creates an aura around the club, with murals and shops selling Argentina and Boca Juniors kits, as well as scarves, training tops, and flags and all sorts of stuff like that.
Don't know why they're insisting on making Messi look so fat and weird. He's a decent player in my opinion.
It's in one of these shops I picked up this beauty. It's a Boca Juniors 2000-2001 shirt with Raquel May 10 on the back. It cost me around 12,500 pesos, which is roughly £40. And I think this one might be genuine as well. It's a really nice quality and it feels authentic. One of the most recognisable designs in football. I love the blue and yellow. I think with iconic clubs, simplicity is best, and that's why I really like this model. The Quilmes sponsor is great too because it's a great beer and I consumed quite a lot of it while I was out in Argentina. It does appear though that during that season they didn't have names on the back of shirt, so the Raquelme on the back is a little bit strange. But he's another player that I grew up watching and really enjoyed, and I think it looks cool. So as soon as I saw it, I knew I was going to buy it. Now on to the most exciting football bit of the trip so far, going to a Boca Juniors game. Unfortunately, the day before the game, we got robbed and I lost my phone, so I don't have loads of footage from it. However, I can show you what I did get and also talk about the process of buying tickets and stuff like that. Getting tickets to Boca Juniors games is very difficult. River Plate is much easier, so if you're in Buenos Aires and you just want to see one of the big two, I'd recommend going for River Plate because you're more likely to find tickets and not be disappointed. Boca do not sell individual tickets to games. They are season ticket only, and there's an 8-year waiting list for a season ticket at the Bombonera. So the only way to get a ticket is basically to either be or know a season ticket holder. And me, being a kid from England who's never been on this continent before, let alone the country or city, this was going to be tricky, so I had to go through unofficial routes, the most reliable being ticketing agencies or brokers. Hotels and hostels often advertise tickets to Boca or River games, although this time I used an agency called Landing Pad BA. You simply go to their website and register your interest for the game you would like to attend. They then use their connections to try and find a spare season ticket and then give it to you on the day of the game for a one-use basis, which you then give back to them at the end. Meaning, for one night only, I was Sebastian Pablo Ruffini, which is a far cooler name than my own anyway. While these tickets were reliable, there was some drawbacks to going through this route. First, while these agencies do what they can, there is no guarantee of finding tickets. Meaning I had to register my interest for this game a month before and didn't find out I was going until maybe 3 or 4 days before. The other is that you're going to be overcharged massively. It cost me around £100 to attend this game, which is way over the face value price, I'm sure. So if you're not like me and didn't have your heart completely set on going to the Bombonera and you want to go to a game in Argentina or Buenos Aires, I'd recommend one of the other clubs because it's simpler and you can probably get them for cheaper as well. That being said, it was completely worth it for me as the stadium and the atmosphere was incredible. Bombonera literally means chocolate box and it's earned that nickname due to its square shape and steep stands. It's a really unique shape for a stadium and one of the coolest I've ever been to. As for the atmosphere, it was great. The Ultras were singing for about an hour before kickoff and did not stop all game. But worth bearing in mind as well, Boca were not in good form going into this game and they were playing the bottom of the league at home. In England, the atmosphere would be so depressingly flat, but this was still a celebration and a demonstration of the pride they have for the club and their area. Boca are the reigning champions of Argentina and they managed to lose 2-1 at home to Cologne, who are winless and rock bottom of the table at the time of the game. The standard was very, very low, very few passages of play and not many recognisable tactical structures either. There was flashes of technical ability, but honestly, from a football standpoint, it was hard to watch. I've seen games in non-league in England which are of better technical and tactical standard. What I did find odd though is how little game state impacted the atmosphere. In England, generally, the better you're playing, the louder you'll be. But here the Ultras didn't even flinch at any of the goals. They just sang through it like nothing happened. It was weird and I wasn't sure if I liked it. Overall though, it was an incredible experience going to La Bombonera and it's a must for every football fan in my opinion. The rest of our time in Argentina was spent in Patagonia, so there wasn't too many more football-y activities. However, there's one or two things I'm just going to throw in here now. In Bariloche, we saw a Boston United sticker on a lamppost, which, amused me. Like, never had any interaction with Boston United while being in the UK. So just to see one out there, I don't know. That's the sort of thing which I find really funny and one of my favourite things about going abroad. While in El Calafate, there was a toy museum and it was full of old table football tables. Football is literally the only pub game I'm any good at, and I used to love Subbuteo as a kid, so I had a lot of fun just seeing what that translated to over here, and there was some really cool stuff in there.
It's like Subbuteo. That's River Plate versus Boca. This is table football, right?
Yeah.
You do that, and they kick it. That's so cool. I would love one of these.
There's only one way.
Yeah, so to save it with the keeper, you're struggling really.
Yeah, they have glued that ball down. That's such a shame. Look at it.
Do you know how impossible this would be to play? Like how frustrating it would be?
Yeah, well, it'd just be this, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Technically, it would go back exactly where it came from, right?
That's fantastic though. I'd love one of those in my house. So you kind of got your traditional table football here, Argentina against Chile or whatever. This again, it's like River Plate, and this is so good. You use these to move a player. Then springboard football, I guess. A bit more Subbuteo-like. More trigger rated, and then more trigger stuff here. Once again, Boca against River.
One last thing that happened, this actually technically happened in Chile, but I'm going to include it here because there's just not enough other stuff in Chile to get its own section. We were in a bar, just having a drink, and there was sort of Netflix playing on a screen, completely in silent. And then out of nowhere, out of the corner of my eye, I saw Alexis Sanchez pop up in a show. Turns out he plays himself in the 2019 film Me Amo Alexis, where he befriends a young boy and teaching him about football and life. That's what the synopsis says anyway. If this video gets, what should we say, what's good for this channel? 10 likes? 10 likes, I will watch and review Me Amo Alexis. Anyway, next destination, let's go. Our next stop was Paraguay. Now, most backpackers skip over Paraguay. However, it was on our way to Bolivia, so we thought we might as well pass through. And it actually turned out to be one of the more football-y bits of the whole trip. CONMEBOL is the governing body of football in South America. It's their equivalent to UEFA, and their offices are based in Asunción, the capital of Paraguay.
Here we are. This is where it all goes down. All the South American footballing decisions. CONMEBOL.
In the offices, there is a football museum, and we had a bit of time to kill before our hostel let us check in, so we thought we'd just go and have a look.
We're inside a football.
It wasn't a massive museum, it wasn't as big as the one in Sao Paulo. However, it had a few of the main trophies of the continent and a few sort of plastic ones you could kind of pretend to lift up and stuff.
Bad vibes here. This is when we won the Champions League, lost to Santos in the Club World Cup final. I think that's the kit I've got, isn't it?
Yeah,
that's that.
Boca shit.
Yeah, that's the Boca. Pretty sure that's the one I own. Awesome.
We had a tour guide who didn't speak much English, and I don't speak any Spanish, so we had to rely on the neutral language of football to communicate.
Flamengo win last time. Flamengo won it last time. See? Yeah.
America Cup.
So Copa America.
Manchester.
Oh, Manchester. No.
Manchester. Intercontinental. Manchester.
Oh, beat it. Yeah, they beat them. Yeah. Manchester. Yeah. Yeah. In the Club World Cup, Intercontinental.
Nacional.
Uruguay. Yes.
Uruguay.
Suarez played for them.
Suarez.
Yeah.
Suarez.
Took me a bit of time, but I worked out he supported Man United. And while it wasn't as interactive as the one in Sao Paulo, look, there's fuck all else to do in Paraguay. So if you're a football fan and you're in Ascension, it's worth going to.
Messi, Neymar, James Rodriguez. I think that might be Rocky Santa Cruz. Forlan. Not too sure actually who that is. And then Sanchez. I think that's Valencia.
Neymar.
Messi.
Santa Cruz.
Santa
Paraguay.
Cruz, yeah. James.
Rodriguez.
Forlan.
Platini Sanchez.
Sanchez, yeah,
Sanchez.
sí.
Reina Castellanos. Venezuela.
Venezuela.
Sanchez.
Alexis.
Marsella.
Okay.
Uvilla, Perú.
Peru.
Antonio Valencia, Ecuador.
See Manchester. Yeah.
Once we got to our hostel, one of the people who worked there said that he was taking some people to a game that night. I said yes before Johnny could say no, and before we knew it, we found ourselves in the Cerro Porteno away end, away against Ascension rivals Guarani. En route to the game, I picked up this Cerro Porteno away kit. And I mean, I think this is beautiful. I love this sort of pattern going up here with the red, the white and the blue. I think it's really stylish and really modern and different to all the template kits that you'll get in Europe. While I love the kit, I do have some issues with this particular shirt though. Firstly, it's an XL. I asked the guy for a medium and he said that this was a medium, but once I got home, I realised it was way too big for me. To be honest, it cost me a tenner and the guy was keeping them all in a bin bag, so I can't complain too much, but it is slightly annoying as it's probably a bit too big for me to play five-a-side in. Also, what is quite annoying as well, the number on the back of this shirt, the number 10, keeps sort of, I guess, leaking, for the want of a better word, when I wash it. So this sort of, the back is sort of spilling this sort of like sticky blueness away from the centre of the kit, which is quite annoying and makes me fear for the long-term potential of this shirt. And finally, it's not an embroidered badge, it's just sort of part of the kit. I don't mind this too much, however, personally, if I had the choice, I like the badge to be its own entity and physical on the kit rather than just sort of, part of the material and sort of printed on. Once again, I highly doubt Puma are aware of this or have a serial number for this kit, but look, I think it looks really cool, if nothing else, and once again, 10 quid, you can't really argue with it. The game's being played at Estadio Defensas El Chaco, which is the Paraguay national team stadium, because Guarani, who were the home team, stadium was too small. The security when we were going in felt a bit extra. They made everyone take off their belts. Like, you weren't allowed to wear a belt into the ground because it could be used as a weapon, according to them.
Different vibe, actually.
It is a much different vibe. It's quieter. Is it tenser? I don't know. These guys we got through these guys quite easily.
Don't say got through easily.
They don't speak English.
The atmosphere was really good for this one as well. It wasn't anywhere near full, but because we were in the away end, it means that we were right behind the ultras and where all the atmosphere was going on. There was actually more away fans than home fans. Guarani, I gather, aren't a particularly big club, whereas Cerro Porteno are, I think, the second most successful side in the country. So the away fans outnumbered the home fans quite considerably in the end. Something which was quite funny and something I hadn't seen before was there was a dog in the away end.
There's a dog in the ground. I've never seen that before in my life. Are they that desperate for fans? Like,
I don't understand how in a stadium you're not allowed to wear a belt. Someone was managing to get a whole live dog in, but I don't know. It made the whole thing interesting, and the dog, to be fair to it, seemed somewhat interested in the game. A safety thing I should point out is that while being in with the ultras is more fun and is louder and you do get a more authentic and vibrant experience, it does come with an attached risk. We left the game with 10 minutes to go because we were told it could get dangerous by the guy from the hostel who took us, and while we were leaving the stands we were told to hide our phones and any valuable possessions. South America in general has a risk and football grounds tend to be in sketchy areas, so while I'd 100% recommend going to games, just keep an eye out, be aware, and don't make it easy for them to pickpocket you or even worse, rob you. The game ended 3-0 to Cerro Porteno, who looked really good. The first 2 goals were actually really nice moves, and the third goal was a penalty, which again came from a nice passage of play.
That was a fucking brilliant header.
That was a great header. Yeah.
Brilliant.
I know I only have 2 games to compare, but the Paraguayan League surprisingly seemed way higher level technically and tactically than the Argentinian one. Speaking of the Paraguayan League, I was doing some research before the game to sort of, get some context behind the match. And the top of the league at the time were a side called Libertad, whose top goal scorer was 40-year-old Oscar Cardozo, that guy who used to play for Benfica and scored the equaliser in the Europa League final against Chelsea. He is still playing out there, but it gets even better than that. If Cardozo can't play, he's injured, suspended, out of form, whatever, their backup striker is 41-year-old Roque Santa Cruz. Incredible. The joy I got from finding out that Roque Santa Cruz is still playing, and not just playing, but playing for the side top of the league in his country. Nothing in this world can replicate that. I saw some of the 7 wonders of the world on this trip, but finding that out, that was the biggest dopamine hit I got for 4 months. Next football destination was Colombia. Probably the 3rd most passionate football nation on the country, behind Brazil and Argentina. And I'd also say the most underachieving. I'm not super educated on the history of South American football, but it surprised me that Colombia have only ever won 1 Copa America in their whole history. The footballing experience came when we were in the nation's capital, Bogota, and it was one of the most unique games I've ever been to. When we arrived at our hostel, there was a poster advertising football tours in Bogota, and they were running a tour that night for a game between Millionarios, who are one of the biggest teams in Colombia, against Peñarol, one of the biggest teams in Uruguay, in the Copa Sudamericana, which I believe is the equivalent of their Europa League.
This is like their Europa League anthem playing.
It's so much better than ours. I like the Europa League.
Yeah, water.
The tour included transport to and from the game, ticket to the match, and also unlimited beers beforehand. I think it cost me around £50, which again is overpaying, but with, transport provided, drink included, and a more sociable atmosphere of it being a tour, I didn't mind paying extra. Also, again, didn't want to walk around Bogota late at night, just me and my friend. Prior to the game, I picked up this kit. It's actually their kit from this season, but for some reason it wasn't being sold in an official Adidas store, but instead this little corner shop thing, round the corner from the bar we were drinking in. I quite like it because it reminds me of like a 2010s Chelsea kit, which I used to just wear all the time as a kid. The V-neck, for me, the cut's a bit too deep. I'd have liked it a bit tighter up here, but I paid the equivalent of about 14 quid for it. I can't really complain too much. Millionarios play at Estadio El Campín, which is the city stadium they share with bitter rivals Santa Fe. Our tour guide Carlos told us that they actually have 2 rivaling ultras groups which sit on either side of the goal. The one closest to us were called Blue Rain or something, which would prove to be pretty ironic, as I'll get onto. Millonarios literally means the millionaires, which in Colombia isn't that big a deal because 1 million pesos is like under £200. Millonarios is actually the nickname of River Plate, and doing some research, it seems that they seem to have a brotherhood with the Buenos Aires club. So by wearing this shirt and going to the game, I was betraying my Boca roots. I'm already turned on them. That defeat to Cologne was just too much to handle, and I had to switch sides. It was the loudest game I went to out there. Both ends of the ground were singing, people throwing their arms forward like that, jumping up and down. It was fantastic. I tried joining in with the singing because I just felt so left out, but I ended up just kind of like humming and mumbling along to the tunes. Millionarios destroyed Penarol. It was 3-0 after half an hour, and they just seemed a level above the Uruguayans. However, with Bogota being an Andean city, the climate is very unpredictable. At half time, it started pissing it down, and this torrential rain did not stop.
All good? Ready for the second half?
Ultras and hooligans are far less intimidating when they're all dressed in ponchos hiding from the rain. The start of the second half was hilarious. The ball wasn't moving, players were slipping over, no one could control it. I saw some of the worst passages of play I've ever seen live at a game before. It was brilliant.
That's it, that's the worst passage of play I've ever seen.
There was full-on puddles on the pitch at one stage. It was absolutely nuts. The stands were flooded. It was crazy.
A bit rainy.
Penarol got a penalty at one point, and I honestly thought this was probably the hardest penalty anyone's ever taken.
Might be the hardest penalty anyone's ever taken in their life. Limbs in the throw end.
The geezer scored it though, to be fair to him. Like, you know, Terry slipping in Moscow seems even worse now. Around the hour mark, the game was postponed because the rain was too heavy.
Called the game off. Absolutely mental. I've never had this before. An random game. It's crazy.
We had to wait for around 20 minutes to see if the game would continue or not before we were told by our guide that the earliest it was going to resume was midnight, and in which case we all said, fuck that. We're going home. As good a time as we've had. Turns out it did resume at like half midnight, but the score didn't change and it ended 3-1. So those ultras had to wait in the pouring rain for half an hour of goalless football. This is what I mean, man. This is just a different level of commitment and passion that, you know, just doesn't correlate to Europe.
Oh, yeah. But they are just waiting, like. For what? I don't know, but.
Well, it's just a matter of time.
What, are they going to take a hairdryer to the pitch afterwards?
Yeah, I don't know what the fuck.
If you want a football experience in Colombia, I would recommend Bogota. However, I would also recommend Medellin. I didn't go to Medellin, however, I heard it's a brilliant city, and we met many travellers who went to Atletico Nacional games, and apparently the atmosphere over there was absolutely incredible. It's also the place where Andres Escobar was tragically murdered after his own goal in the '94 World Cup. So for probably one of the darkest moments in South American football history, you know, if you're into that sort of stuff, it's an interesting place to visit. So would you also check out Medellin? I probably will go back one day just to go to a game over there. The fourth and final place I'm going to talk about in this video was Ecuador. Not one of the heavyweights of the continent in footballing terms, but it might be on the cusp of a golden generation. I was based in Quito, which is the capital, and it's host to several clubs like LDU Quito, Nacional, Universidad, Acuñas, and Deportivo Quito. However, I went to go and watch Independiente Del Valle, who play in the suburb of San Oloquil. San Oloquil? Did I say that right? Sangoquil. And they're one of the most up-and-coming clubs in the country. I went to the game with a guy called Patricio, who I found doing football tours on Airbnb. He explained to me that this was a local side who over the past 10 years, with a bit of backing from a wealthy owner, have risen up about 4 divisions and reached the Copa Libertadores final and won 2 Copa Sudamericas and a league title as well. They've also produced many members of the Ecuadorian national team and are also the side where Moses Caicedo started off. What was of real interest to me was that the next big thing coming through the academy is 16-year-old Kendry Payers, who Chelsea had signed this summer for around £20 million, and he will stay in Ecuador for about 2 years until he can get a work permit. So I went to their Copa Libertadores group game against Corinthians, hoping to get a glimpse of this future star.
There he is.
Independiente had just moved to a new stadium, the Estadio Banca Guayaquil. It was a nice little stadium, nice little new build, felt quite like Brentford or somewhere like that. The ground was sort of half full and there were no real ultras. There were some kids behind the goal with a drum, but honestly, compared to sort of Millionarios or Boca, you know, you just can't compare the two, really. It felt like a nice family club that was well run and played some excellent football. I think it was a sign of how sort of tame it was, is that not only was it the only ground that I went to out there that you could buy alcohol, you could actually drink it in view of the pitch. You know, which for British fans is a bit of a treat because we're not allowed to do that over here. Corinthians, who famously beat Chelsea in the 2012 Club World Cup final, brought around 200 fans and they were pretty loud. However, their side didn't do too much as Independiente absolutely cooked them 3-0. Kendry Pires, Chelsea's new signing, got about half an hour at the end when the score was 3-0. And you know what? He looked pretty good. He was a bit lightweight at times, but I mean, that's to be expected. He's literally a child. But his touches, his movement, and his general sort of confidence and aura was one of a real future superstar. He was absolutely robbed of an assist at one point where he put in a beautiful cross, but the striker could only put it straight at the goalkeeper and it was saved. One thing I would say about attending games in Ecuador, and particularly Quito, is most of the games are taking place at night, which means getting home can be quite sketchy. I was okay. The ground was in a very nice area of Quito, and my guy Patricio drove me back to my hostel after the game, which was massive of him. So a massive shout out to him and thank you. However, you know, if you're on your own, you know, make sure you've got a taxi or an Uber sorted after the game, because public transport in Quito at night can be quite dangerous. Or at the very least, make sure you're in a big group. The biggest club in Ecuador is Barcelona, who play in Guayaquil, which is the most dangerous city in the country. I met some people who went to a game there and they said it was absolutely insane. So I'm not saying don't go there, but if you do, please take all the correct precautions. Ecuador, like the rest of South America, is a beautiful country full of amazing people and amazing sights. But unfortunately, it does also come with this element of risk and danger. Final show I'm going to discuss is this Independiente. I think it's the third kit, possibly the away kit. I'm not too sure, but it's probably my favourite one that I picked up. I love the purple. There's not really enough purple kits in football. Obviously, you've got Fiorentina, but they're cancelled because they gave West Ham a European trophy. I always think it looks lovely, though. I always think it's a lovely colour and more clubs should adopt it. In true South American style, it is just absolutely covered in sponsors. You've got the Pilsner beer one on the sleeve. You've got Amex somewhere. You've got KFC on the back. It's absolutely fantastic. It's really lightweight, which is great. I wore it playing five-a-side the other day, and it was really, really nice. Also really like having the sort of Ecuadorian flag on either sleeve as well. I think that's a really nice touch. And it's just a fantastic kit, in my opinion. Once again, it cost me just over $10. So, you know, do Marathon know that I own this? Am I allowed to own this? Like, who knows, who cares? I think it looks lovely. And, you know, I've really got kitted out on this trip pretty nicely. Right, so this is a very long video. Congratulations if you made it this far without getting bored. I'll try and put timestamps in the right, you know, in the places so people can just jump to the bit they're interested in, or maybe the bit which concerns them if they're going to South America. I hope this provided us somewhat of a solid guide, or at least a base level and introduction into going to games and experiencing South American football. I wasn't out there to watch football, so there's going to be gaps in my knowledge. I'm going to have missed stuff. This is just my experience that I would quite like to document, and if it's helpful for other people, even better. So that's that. Comment, like, subscribe, all that shit. I'm planning to shift the content a bit on this channel. The match day vlog type stuff I was doing for like the past sort of 2 seasons wasn't really landing, so I'm thinking of doing more sort of general football topics, maybe a bit more stuff like this. I'm not too sure. If there's anything you would like to see on this channel, anything I've done so far which you'd like to see more of, please do let me know down below. I will be doing at some point like a really big travel series of this whole crazy trip I've just been on. That'll go up on my second channel, link in the description. I also post like reviews of music and TV and all sorts of crap on there. It's as bad as the stuff you watch on this channel. You're not gaining anything from it. But yeah, if this sounded interesting, at some point it will go up, probably in like a year's time. Though I've got so much stuff to edit. But yeah, gonna let you go now. You know, I think I might do, if this does well, I might do a video going through maybe some of the kits I've bought, because there's loads more which I didn't talk about in this video. Maybe I'll do some, I don't know, like, maybe, is there any friendlies on I could go to film and stuff like that? I don't know. I have no idea. I'm waffling now. So in a bit. Bye.
We're gonna play football.